It's made by humans, and
Right.
humans will err.
Right. If being in a journal is a good step, but it's not the only thing that matters.
Remember,
Nope.
nothing and everything at the same time can or can't be a science, depending on your approach to investigating it.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah, I would go along with that for the most part, I think.
Science is your approach. It's not what you're looking at.
Science is the method used.
Bam.
And everything has its own method. Trust me, I know.
Because I've joked, everything is a science to me. Like fucking everything.
Man, Google knows too much about me. They're now recommending YouTube videos in French. And the thing is, here's the thing. I might watch this.
Do you speak French?
Yeah.
You could be Canadian, you know that?
I'm half Canadian by ancestry.
Well, there you go.
Oh my god, I'm not half anything.
I am.
Oh, that's right. Hang on. I gotta give Prince of Atheism this one too.
I'm a mutt.
My mother's side is about 98% French Canadian and about 2% First Nation.
Oh wow, okay.
So
you've got some First Nation blood in you.
A little bit. Tiny bit. But then more than Elizabeth Warren, so there's that. Which, yeah. Like, I'm definitely not a Republican. But on the other hand, I do think it's a little bit weird to do some of the things she did with her claims there. And it's like, she's like, no, I didn't ever use it to get a job. It's like, yeah, but you were listed on the diversity list for your university as a Native American professor, so I'm not entirely sure I believe that you ever did anything to take advantage of that.
You know what I just realized, guys?
Politicians are scum?
Well,
I'm not wearing any pants.
I knew that a long time ago. You're not wearing... Okay, no, I just realized that we went live 2 minutes and 27 seconds ago.
Hey, yeah, we did.
And I didn't even fucking realize that I accidentally tapped that. Oh, well, welcome everyone to the Dapper Dinosaur after show or after party.
I just talk more about politics than I almost ever do on live on air.
That's okay. It's all right.
It'll be fine.
Politics are one of these things that, you know, will probably get me demonetized, but that's okay.
Well, my home state's name can get you demonetized. Did you know about that? Or not my home state, my current state's name can get you demonetized.
Really?
Yeah, you put Arizona in the title of the video, there's a high chance it'll get demonetized.
Why is that?
Why is any of the list the way it is?
All right, valid point. But that just seems really extraordinarily weird.
So the way that they made this list of words, right? Because it's not a list that any human sat down and wrote out. It's a machine-generated list. And so what it does is the algorithm looks at videos that have been approved for demonetization by human review, and then it tries to generate metadata based on those approvals for future automatic flagging. So at some point, a bunch of videos with that in the name must have simply been approved for demonetization by human flaggers, and then it just learned the rule, well, Arizona is a word that is likely to be associated with inappropriate content.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. My friend Beach Price had a question for you too, by the way, Dino.
Oh, also, Chris Hansen has just gotten back to me. Would you like me to send him the link?
If he wants to come in, sure.
All right, I'm sending it. What's the question?
Are your parents still YEC?
So, as far as I know, my mother is. She doesn't talk about it very much, but she, every once in a while, something will come up where, like, you know, she'll be watching some nature documentary or something, and she'll make some comment about, oh, isn't it cool how God created this system to help keep the animal alive or something? And I'm just like, yeah, and just move on. My dad, however, I actually don't think he is. I don't think he has a firm opinion on the matter, but I think he's more. I think if you were to ask him, he probably wouldn't identify as a young Earth creationist, and he's fairly open to evolution having been a major component in modern biodiversity. I just think it's not a topic he bothers to grapple with much.
Right. I mean, and let's face it, if the Catholic Church is willing to accept it.
They have actually for a while now.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know. I remember the news when it first came out that they did. I was like, whoa, that's an improvement.
Yeah. And actually, the next largest Christian body in the world is the Eastern Orthodox Church. And they have not come out saying, oh, yeah, no, evolution is totally good. But they've just been like, it's up to you. You can do what you want on that matter. And so you can actually find a variety. And hey, what's up, Chris?
Hello.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
What?
I know. I didn't put the 2 and 2 together. I know Chris.
Oh, well, there you go.
Chris has been in one of my after parties, actually.
Yeah, I was in the one with Kingetto.
I know all this mystery, and then I'm like, hold on, they look familiar.
All right. So Chris, I hear you might be interested in helping out with my idea about textual criticism for the New Testament.
I'd love to, actually.
That would be.
It's fun. It's funny you brought it up right now, actually, because I'm currently working on a response to Richard Carrier, and I'm working with a lot of textual criticism right now, including Bart Ehrman's forgery and counterforgery.
Nice.
So yeah, it's
nice.
Ehrman's got some pretty good stuff, man. He's got some pretty interesting stuff.
Well, one of the things that interests me about that whole idea, it also connects to historical linguistics, because the thing is, in the case of language change and creating daughter languages from parent languages, as well as manuscript history and genetic history, like through common ancestry, these are all what you could call like genetic descent, where there's something fundamental about the thing that's being passed down that maintains large aspects of what came before, but with subsequent modification that can be inherited by subsequent future generations of whatever's being passed down. So that's why you get this nested hierarchy for manuscript families, organisms, and languages. So, like English and German and French and Italian and Hindi and Urdu and Farsi, they're all Indo-European. But some of those are Eastern Indo-European, some are Western Indo-European, some of them are Italic, some of them are Romance, some of them are Germanic. And you get these nested little groups into which they all fall.
And then you have the complete shit show, which is English.
Well, you say that, but so here's the thing. You say that, but if you take the average English sentence and you check, okay, the grammar and vocabulary in this sentence, what language family is it going to come from? Most English sentences contain almost entirely words of Germanic descent using extremely Germanic grammatical forms.
Yeah, it's really only when we start talking about more specific things in our sentences that we take on other languages. But like a lot of our language in its more on its more technical side will then draw out from French and Greek and Latin.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. English starts to become less Germanic seeming when you get outside of common words and get into technical jargon and things. And like if you were to count up the words in the dictionary, yeah, sure, most of them aren't Germanic, but most of those words are also not used very often.
Yeah.
So, yeah, English, any random person coming at English who is, say, someone who doesn't know the language itself but is familiar with Germanic linguistics would pick out English as Germanic pretty quickly.
It's actually really fun to look at just how many words in our vocabulary we use as slang, which are German as well. Like when we'll randomly say that our car went kaput.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
That's literally just German for broke.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also,
I know that word well.
Or arse. Sit down on your arse. That's just German for ass.
Yep. Also, the ruder terms for bodily wastes in English are actually the older Germanic forms.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess.
No, it's piss is the Germanic the old Germanic word for urine directly arrives in modern English as piss.
Yeah, the reason that they became derogatory was primarily because when the Normans invaded, they thought it just sounded rather wrong or disgusting. So the our Norman rulers over in England,
Norman overlords.
basically when you actually have languages that interact with each other, what can end up happening is that you end up with a dominant language and you have a sub language. So the dominant language will end up dictating how the sub language is actually used.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And so what the Normans did when they spoke French is that they actually dictated a lot of how English was going to be used from that time on.
Yep.
It's also why we now say have a specific word for like meats because they didn't like the way they sounded. So we say pork instead of
pig,
or we say beef instead of cow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Old English didn't do that. Old English, it would just use good old Germanic words like, "Yo, you want to have some cool? Let's go have some beef." All right, but and
oddly enough, the interaction with French also kind of killed how gendered our language was as well.
How did chicken miss the boat then? Like, because chicken's still chicken. Well, I mean, let's say like in the South, and like, you're going to get me some Yardbird.
I actually don't know the specifics. Well, one thing is that while you can see trends in lexical change in languages, they're rarely universal. There's always, or not always, but there's usually some exception to these weird lexical changes. So, and like even areas where the lexicon tends to be highly conserved, you can find weird areas where it's not. So, for instance, most languages, personal and relative pronouns, as well as interrogative pronouns, tend to be extremely highly conserved. They tend to just never get replaced. But English replaced its third-person plural pronoun with a third-person plural pronoun from Old Norse. So Old English, the word for they is thea, but the problem with that is that it's also phonetically identical to the word for she. And so Old English just grabbed a word from Norse, and they were like, oh, hey, they have this other pronoun for third-person plural. We'll just take it. Thank you. We're just going to use it now. Thanks, Vikings. Could you stop pillaging our monasteries now? No? Okay. So, yeah, English has some weird tendencies like that. Like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to note on chicken. So actually, our word chicken is a really weird word. So in most other forms of English, the standard word from the Germanic origin is, or they'll use hen.
Okay.
Where chicken is just this really weird word, and I'm trying to find some more on the origin of it. But
you know what's a really weird word is dog. Good luck finding out where that came from. That just appeared in English one day. Because the Germanic, like in Old English, it's Hund, just like it is in German.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, those are like, das ist meine Hunden. Those are my dogs. And older English. But yeah, then suddenly dog appears in like the 15th century or something, and it just sticks for some reason.
Yeah, there is a theory that holds that the word chicken was actually developed as an erroneous combination of hen used for the female and then cock used for the male into one.
Oh, that actually sounds like that could be viable for sure.
Well, one of the problems is that a lot of etymologies seem viable, and then they turn out to be wrong. So don't quote
Fair
it.
Enough.
It's a viable option, but
my favorite nutty etymology was from this guy. He was a philosopher named Alvin Boyd Kuhn, and he had this theory that all of Christian religion and a lot of its words and symbols could be traced back to Egypt. So his idea of the name Lazarus was that it came from El Osiris.
So the Egyptians used a Semitic word, even though their language isn't actually Semitic. It's a different branch of Afroasiatic. It's a different branch of the Afroasiatic. Yeah, but it's a different branch of the Afroasiatic language, which also doesn't have an L sound in it. So they just grabbed some Semitic word, shoved it in front of a Greek transliteration of the name of their deity, which doesn't sound much like what most linguists reconstruct for the name of Osiris.
Yep.
And then
his theory for the word Bethany was that it came from Egyptian Bet Anu.
Oh, please.
That's and
his theory, like just taking sound-alike things and stringing them together.
It's the game was looks alike is alike. He also had a theory that the Spanish word El, as in the, comes from Hebrew El, meaning God.
And not say a demonstrative pronoun in vulgar Latin like it actually comes from? Because, for those of you who don't know a whole lot about linguists, spoiler alert, when a language develops a definite article, it almost always comes from a demonstrative pronoun.
Yep.
That's just the normal route. The word for this becomes the word for the. And then sometimes a new word fills in the relative pronoun. In fact, in English, our demonstrative pronouns actually come from articles, which originally came from demonstrative pronouns. So we've come full circle. So
it has been way too long since I've been to English class. This is melting my brain.
I'm literally an English major, so
mistake my silence for boredom. I am soaking this shit up, man. I love this shit.
I'm trying to.
I'm literally an English major, so this is the thing that I do every day.
Yeah, see, I have a history degree, but I have a minor in medieval and Renaissance studies, but the classes I took outside of history for that were Old English and the history of the English language. So those are the English classes I took. I didn't take medieval literature or Chaucer or anything. No, I was just let's just take Old English. I'll ace Old English. I can do that. In fact, my professor had me sit in the back of the classroom so that not everyone could see that I was raising my hand for every question because they were getting intimidated.
And somebody's asking me how good is my Hebrew.
Oh, my Hebrew?
No, my Hebrew.
Oh, yours?
I lived in Israel.
Oh, okay.
How good is my Hebrew? I would consider barely passable nowadays.
Oh, I'm
not like I use it on the daily.
I'm not even barely passable.
Last time you resist the pun, Neil.
Mine's not even.
You say, it's hanging a little left today.
Mine's not even usable. I can read it.
Can you?
But I cannot speak a single word of it accurately.
Actually, on my last live debunk that I did call out. I think that it was Kent Hovind had said, "Oh, if your Bible translation says the heavens for Genesis 1:1, you need to get a new Bible." And so I looked it up in Hebrew, and I was like, "Nope, it says heavens in plural in the Hebrew. That's about as far as I can get."
Yeah, it's shamayim.
Yep.
Yeah, shamayim.
It's the masculine plural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is,
shamayim is heaven.
And the thing is, it's not hard to figure out plural number in Semitic languages, at least when it uses the plural suffix, which Arabic annoyingly tends not to outside of words for humans, but still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about Arabic, but Arabic has...
Yeah, a lot of people spoke it there.
Yeah. So one of the more annoying things about Arabic is that most words that refer to things other than humans have an irregular plural form that you can't predict simply from looking at the singular form.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So... Yeah,
you're right there, Prince. What are you wrestling with your microphone?
Kind of.
It's a little bit easier in older Arabic dialects, but there's a whole bunch of other grammatical things with older Arabic dialects, like South Arabian stuff that is such a mess to try and figure out.
Well,
same thing happened to Hebrew though too. There's modern Hebrew and then there's ancient.
Oh yeah.
Hebrew.
Well, one crazy thing is. if you take a class now in Modern Standard Arabic or Al-Fusha, they will insist that Al-Fusha maintains a robust three-case system for its nouns. But that basically no one speaking the language still uses all of the cases, except in like ossified forms with set phrases from history. Even when people have to use that form of the language to communicate, they tend not to use the case system. And everything the case system marks is also set in the word order in the modern form of Al-Fusha. So there's no reason to have a case system. But if you forget to add those two extra little strokes above the aleph that isn't pronounced at the end of that word, you'll get a big red X mark. I found that out when I took Arabic.
Now, I have a question.
Yep.
Given in the modern world, just with travel being much easier than it used to be, and of course with the internet, with uses of vernacular gone awry, that's what really fuels linguistic divergence. Do you think it's still possible that
we're doing hieroglyphics again?
Do you think it's still possible
they're called emojis.
that the current languages can separate? Like, I live in Cincinnati, and I go 50 miles to the south, and people are speaking a much different dialect than I do right here.
Yeah.
Do you think it's still possible that new languages can be created through the use of vernacular given our modern society?
Yes,
I do. Yeah, I do. I think the process will probably slow for widely spoken languages in first world countries. So I think it's going to be a long time before we get a second English language. But on the other hand, Portuguese has basically already split into two languages.
Mm-hmm.
So if you
that's a good
learn,
example, actually.
Yeah, if you learn Brazilian Portuguese and then you try to go use it in Portugal, you will have a tough time getting by. It's not the same language.
It's like the Frenches. It's like Quebecois French versus Parisian French.
Yeah.
They're They're different now. And then you get Acadian French.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You can also start pointing to some heavy dialectal changes happening in Egyptian Arabic versus Yemeni Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, or then there's Maghrebi Arabic, which is already basically incomprehensible compared to the other Arabic. The thing is, the Arabic dialects are about as closely related to each other as most of the Romance languages are. They're called dialects for political, not linguistic reasons.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's also one of the trouble is, what's the difference between a dialect and a language is there's no line. It's like speciation in nature. Like, where do you draw the line between when a new species is formed from a previous parent species? There's no line to draw. It's happened at some point.
Yeah, and it's slow, different variations.
Right.
But ultimately, eventually, they just can no longer breed anymore.
Right. So the standard definition for what makes a language a distinct language is that speakers of other related varieties of speech cannot comprehend the spoken version of whatever language you're trying to consider. But the thing is that mutual comprehensibility like that comes in degrees. Mm-hmm. So most native English speakers can understand about 40 to 50% of what's said in what's called Scots, which is a variety of English or a language that's spoken in parts of the Scottish Highlands. But the thing is, does that make it a different language?
Cool accent, though.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, the thing is, there's a difference between Scottish English and Scots.
Oh, yeah.
So most people in Scotland speak Scottish English. A fairly small number speak Scots, and an even smaller number speak Scottish Gaelic.
Mm.
And then there's Welsh English too, which is I cannot physically understand some forms of Welsh English.
Yeah.
I found out when I found my biological family that I actually am a quarter Welsh.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Congrats. You're going to learn some Welsh?
I've become friends with Creaky Blinder. Have you known the guy?
I haven't talked to him. I know of him, though.
Yeah, he's got a great show.
Yeah, he does.
We've been shooting the shit a little bit on I asked him to come on my show. So you're going to come on and share your deconversion story? He goes, how do you know I'm not religious? Like, oh, no. Actually, dude, I just guessed by your content because you poke fun at people like that.
He says he's not religious repeatedly in his videos.
Yes, but he says he's not religious, but he didn't say whether or not he believes in a deity.
I suppose that's not the same thing. Yeah, okay.
Right.
I mean, technically, I have not. It's not even technical. It's actually true. I have not given my position on the matter either way, and people in my personal life get to have more insight onto my position. But for the purposes of my channel, I actually don't actually give my position on that. So
really?
Yeah, no, because the reason is my channel
is just poke fun of the doctrine.
Well, my channel is supposed to be about educating about science.
Sure.
And I don't want things to distract from that, including my religious stance or lack thereof, and or my political stances. Because I have stances on both matters, but they don't relate to things like biology or cladistics or anything like that. So they're not at issue on my channel. And people who come on, I ask, like, you don't have to be silent about it, but it's not going to be the thing we talk about. If you want to talk about whether or not Jesus is the Son of God, do it on a different channel.
Yeah,
it's fine. Okay. It's fine. Have the discussion. That's great. Just not on the Dapper Dino channel. That's for talking about science and
science-related things. Yes.
Right. Exactly. If it's not at least science adjacent, it's not there. And I don't think that the existence of God is. I think it's more of a philosophical question.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. So,
yeah. And in fact, I would say I think most people who are theists would probably tend to agree with that too. Like the arguments for God that I see tend to not focus so much on science, and they tend to focus more on philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I think most people, theist or not, would probably say that it's more of a philosophical than a scientific issue, which isn't what my channel is for.
Nope, your channel is for educating people on scientific knowledge. That's what your channel is.
And pointing out how unbelievably stupid creationists can be.
That too.
Which, by the way, tomorrow...
Which kind of got me hooked on your channel. So.
Good. I have fun with it. I also sometimes have hair-pullingly frustrating days. So, it's...
I got to be careful with mine at my age. If I pull too hard, it may not come back.
Well, see, I'm just covered in scales now, so I guess I don't have to worry about it.
Feathers? I thought you guys had feathers.
So that actually something that comes up a lot. People say, hey, where are the feathers? And the thing is, we actually have some pretty good skin impressions for Ceratosaurus, which is the genus that my avatar is a reconstruction of. No feathers on any of the skin impressions.
I caught one in Jurassic World alive.
So. Oh, there you go. Actually, one of my subscribers just linked me to a Jurassic World evolution gameplay video of an Allosaurus fighting a Ceratosaurus. I'm like, oh, hey, how come the Ceratosaurus got killed by the Allosaurus? I'm like, because Allosaurus is like 50% bigger. Because people ask me, like, oh, which dinosaur would win in a fight? And my answer is always like the heavier one.
Yeah, the bigger one.
Yeah.
It's called right of weight.
Right, exactly. That's what's all... There are very few exceptions. Like Allosaurus probably did take prey heavier than itself. But for the most part, if you have two predatory dinosaurs and you're going to ask me who's going to win, you can ask the question yourself right now by just checking on mass estimates. The one with the higher mass estimate is the one that I will give the fight to.
Yep, I put my money on him.
Right. Now, if you're like, oh, it's very specific. What if it's T-Rex versus Spinosaurus, but it's in the middle of the ocean? Like, well,
then they're both toast.
Yeah. So, well, people. That's the thing. People try to come up with weird ideas is to get me to come up with a different answer.
T-Rex,
and actually,
Allosaurus on the moon.
Right. Well, actually, Spinosaurus is one of the areas where I will sometimes go with the lower mass dinosaur because Spinosaurus wasn't really adapted for fighting on land. So, like the Spinosaurus T-Rex fight, I actually give to T-Rex when people ask me on that one. I'm like, yeah, probably T-Rex. It had a stronger bite, had bigger teeth, bigger jaw.
Yep.
Had sharper teeth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
they kind of got those aspects right about Jurassic Park when those specific dinosaurs battled each other.
Except that nowadays the Spinosaurus is hopelessly outdated in terms of the reconstruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's actually one of my criticisms of the Jurassic Park movies is that when they came out in 1993, right? This was bringing the latest and greatest in paleontology with, maybe like 3 or 4 years delay, right? Which is pretty good for a public depiction of a scientific matter. Mm-hmm. It really advanced the public understanding of dinosaurs from being stuck in the 50s to essentially up to date.
Oh, you mean those old shows that showed the T-Rexes teeing off against Triceratops?
Yeah. And, the T-Rex looked like a kangaroo or something because it was standing upright with its tail dragging.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. About the only major inaccuracies were the
Dilophosaurus
thing for Dilophosaurus and also the size of the velociraptors.
And the size of Dilophosaurus, for that matter.
And that, too.
But yeah, so it really brought the public basically up to date. Let's say it was 1995, and you ask someone from the public to think of what a dinosaur looks like, they would probably think about something from Jurassic Park, and that would also probably be what most paleontologists would think of at the time. But since then, the Jurassic Park movies have not moved. The Jurassic Park movies are still bringing you the paleontology of the late 80s. And I find that disappointing because it means that a large segment of the population still thinks of dinosaurs the way they're portrayed in the 1993 movie Jurassic Park. But we now know that there were many problems with that from the current understanding. Sure. Most of them wouldn't have been a problem at the time because we didn't have the evidence we do now. But
not only that, we may find out down the road that what we know now was actually a little off to what we are. Later,
yeah. Right? Although we are definitely we're currently in the midst of a paleontology boom where new fossils are being discovered and new species being named
at an alarming rate, too.
Right. I believe that currently, for the last year or two, the average rate of dinosaur naming has been, or Mesozoic dinosaur naming, like we're not counting birds here, has been about 1 a week.
Is it that much, really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Most weeks have had about 1 new dinosaur from the Mesozoic named.
And you know what's crazy is fossilization is everything has to be perfect for that shit to happen. So the fact that we're finding new species at that kind of a rate and naming them is pretty cool because fossilization does not happen very easy. Because they say we are the species, all the billions of species we have today are literally make up, what is it, between 1% and 2% of all the life that's ever been on the planet?
Yeah, probably about that. I mean, it's hard to quantify, but that seems like a reasonable estimate.
Just for that reason that we don't have all the fossil record.
Well, one of the reasons that we're having this boom is because previously unavailable fossil sites are opening up. So, especially in China. Because one of the problems with China is that China was not big on letting Western scientists in.
That's right. Yeah.
But they also weren't caring too much to fund their own paleontology. Because, I mean, let's be honest, your average communist government cares more about rockets than it does about fossils.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's what they were funding. But since China has been opening up more and more to both trade and science cooperation with the West, it has opened up a lot of these fossil-bearing strata that were previously just unexplored. And so that's one of the reasons why a lot of these new species that are getting named are coming from China. Because these are rich, but essentially virgin fossil beds. No one's been there except in the past decade or so, maybe less in some cases. And some of them are extremely good fossil-bearing strata. They were just exceptional preservation of a wide variety of species, including things that normally have a hard time fossilizing, like very small animals. Like, if you look at, say, some of the U.S. formations, like especially the Morrison Formation, where Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus are from, and you would get the impression that if you took that sample of organisms as a representative sample, what you would get is this idea that the Morrison Formation, when it was around as the current environment, was basically just a bunch of Allosauruses hunting a bunch of sauropods with a few Ceratosauruses in there eking out an existence on scraps. But that's probably not true. there were probably a whole host of small animals, medium-sized animals. There were probably lots of different species, but the thing is, the Morrison Formation doesn't preserve small bones.
That's right. Yeah.
It only preserves big stuff, basically. And so that's probably a preservation bias. And that's actually a pretty common preservation bias. It's easier to preserve large things than small things. That's why all of the first dinosaurs discovered tended to be things like Iguanodon and
massive.
Megalosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, what's now once again Brontosaurus after spending a long time being Apatosaurus.
I know. Like, what the hell happened there?
So what happened was originally the Apatosaurus remains and the Brontosaurus remains were always seen as pretty similar. But then a Brontosaurus skull was eventually found, and the conclusion was essentially, hey, you know what? There really aren't that many differences between Apatosaurus and what we're calling Brontosaurus. So there's really not sufficient evidence to call Brontosaurus its own genus. And since Apatosaurus was named first, Brontosaurus becomes a junior synonym, which means it's actually Apatosaurus. And so, but then a few years ago, someone did an extensive survey of all of the known Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus remains with this just ridiculously long, like several pages long character matrix for both of them. And it came to the conclusion that no, the remains associated with what was then known as Apatosaurus excelsus were sufficiently different to constitute a different genus, which meant since they were originally named Brontosaurus, that name once again takes precedence for the species. So once again, we have Brontosaurus excelsus. And that hasn't been uncontroversial, but I think enough people are, like enough paleontologists are kind of on board that it's now safe to call it Brontosaurus once again. And of course, one of the things is, especially in paleontology, when you say where the cutoff is between different genera is a little bit subjective. Mm-hmm. Some people prefer a broader definition for genera. Some people prefer to split them. And one thing that I actually am going to talk about in my video tomorrow is that there is a problem in paleontology right now where every little tiny difference between two fossils gets a new species and genus name. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's probably not an accurate reflection of what was actually going on at the time. And, but the thing is, I get it. You discover a new dinosaur, you're going to describe it in a paper. You don't want to use a name that someone else already used. You want to be the one to name it.
Right.
So you give it a new name. And like, that
seems a little deceptive, I guess.
I mean, essentially, we don't have a hard and fast rule about it because they're extinct. So we can't get genetic information. We usually can't even get soft tissue information for sure. So you just kind of have to say, does it seem reasonable enough that other people will complain? Mm-hmm. Or won't complain, I mean. And if you don't think they'll complain, then just go for it. Name it something new. I mean, everyone knows what you're going to be talking about. But like, there are other areas in biology where, like, if you applied those standards, there would be far fewer. Like, if you were to apply the standards used for naming a new genus for beetles to, say, ceratopsians.
They're one of the largest numbered species in the world. Oh,
I know.
Like 380 to 400,000 species, they figure.
Right. But if you were to use those standards for, say, dinosaurs in the Mesozoic, there'd probably be like 20 dinosaur genera out there.
Yeah, okay. I see your point. Sure.
Yeah. So like every single ceratopsian would probably be in the same genus. Every single hadrosaur, actually, possibly every single ornithopod would just be in a single genus by those standards. So it's one of those things where, like, the only thing that really has a hard definition is clade. Mm-hmm. And genuses aren't clade. They can be clades, but the thing is that when you pick a new genus, even if you have selected a new clade, there's no particular rank that genus has as a clade because clades aren't ranked.
Right.
So it's essentially arbitrary. So
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of the problems where, like, humans like to put things in boxes. Let's say this is genus Ceratosaurus. This is genus Allosaurus. This is genus Saurophagonex. This is genus whatever. But on the ground, in actual living organisms, those things have no meaning.
Right.
What has meaning is gene pools and individuals. And that's all there is. Mm-hmm. the gene pools and the individuals
Ultimately,
making them up. Yeah.
Yep.
And so the animals involved don't care whether or not you're going to call one of them Torvosaurus and one of them Triceratops. Like they don't.
No,
Like,
of course they don't.
right.
They're going to be like,
Yeah,
what?
they're not even going to notice the debate.
Yeah, no. They're going to be, where the fuck are the berries that I could
Right.
eat?
So these things are, but on the other hand, in order to scientifically study organisms, we have to be able to identify what we're talking about. I have to be able to say that when I say, like, if I say Panthera tigris, you know what group of animals I'm talking about if you're also a biologist. And whether or not Panthera tigris is really its own species, or whether or not there might be fertile hybrids with other species in Panthera, I don't care. You know what I mean if you're a scientist, which is I mean a tiger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not, and I knew what you were talking about.
Well, I mean, good. I appreciate that. I appreciate that not everything I say is just what?
I have to break in here for a second. Two things that another freaking atheist has posted in the chat there. 8.7 million species, I believe. It was some dude at Hawaiian University that came up with that number, and it's merely an estimate.
Yeah.
They actually believe there might be almost possibly another half of that number added on to that as our actual species that are still alive today. But also, he was saying something about, I remember seeing this earlier and I forgot to ask it. It's my fault. But new dialects and languages coming up. He says he knows we moved on, but
I'm happy to go back to languages.
He says it might be evolution of languages, or it's people just actually saying things wrong. And I'm like, I don't think that's how it works, but it's possible that there may be a couple of instances of that. But
so
like
one
wrong
thing,
pronunciations or something.
One thing is, in linguistics, the only way to really say that something has been said wrong is if speakers of the target language which you're speaking in don't understand you.
Yeah.
So other than that, there's really not a wrong way to say things as long as intelligibility is maintained, because linguistics, like all science, is descriptive, not prescriptive. So for instance, if you drop a rock and it fails to fall with an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared, the rock didn't fall wrong. That's not how it works. What it means is that something about your understanding about how rocks fall is wrong.
Or there was interference of some kind.
Right, which would, I mean, ultimately you didn't understand the interference because you were expecting A, but you got B. So either the way things fall is wrong, or there was an external factor that you didn't know about, but somehow it was you that was wrong in predicting that this is what would happen, but failing to predict correctly.
That's right, yeah.
So linguistics is very much a prescriptivist thing because it's science. And so it's definitely true, though, that language change can be brought about by people saying things in ways that were not the standard way to say them previously. So, for instance, sound changes tend to come about because the sound change makes it somewhat easier for the people to say whatever word it is whatever class of words are undergoing the sound change. Grammar changes tend to take place either through reanalysis of older forms or attempting to simplify other forms. Like, for instance, auxiliary verbs sometimes end up as suffixes or prefixes rather than being standalone verbs. Things like that will happen. And so someone looking back from, say, 100 years before this change takes place might have said that was wrong because they wouldn't understand it. But to
Give them an example of something like that.
Of an auxiliary verb becoming the verb going in English is sometimes used for an immediate future tense. I'm going to go to the store soon, or I'm gonna, but then it gets reduced to I'm gonna go to the store.
Right.
And so eventually what could happen is if this gets reduced enough, the phrase I'm going might actually be reanalyzed as its own verb with its own inflections that involve a prefixed incorporation of person marking, followed by a verb that is not conjugated. And now you have what was once a standalone auxiliary verb being turned into a new verb that has the meaning of, near future tense and has its own unique inflections that go with it.
Mhm.
English doesn't have too many of its own versions of auxiliary verbs forming a prefix or a suffix onto the
Going is a
actual.
good example, though.
Yeah,
Like
it's
using as well.
right. It's possible that the weak simple past in Germanic languages, which is the ending with a T or a D for the past tense for the simple past,
Mhm.
it's possible that's an example of the incorporation of what's probably more likely a preposition than an auxiliary verb.
Right.
But that's very speculative, but it's a possible explanation as to how that form came about. Because the older version of Germanic past tenses was using umlaut to form what are currently called the strong noun or strong verbs in Germanic languages.
Right.
That's the older
Right.
system. But because it's more complicated, it has significantly declined in English. Especially since nowadays, after the great vowel shift, the umlaut process to form strong verbs is no longer very predictable.
The great vowel shift. I have a joke sometimes where I say, "Yeah, I had a vowel movement."
Well, the great vowel shift explains why in English the letters that we use to write vowels vary so much from the letters that we use to write the same vowels in other languages.
That's true too. Yeah.
So I believe it was not long after Shakespeare, most long vowels in English diphthongized, and there was this whole big shift around of the value of a lot of short vowels. And yeah, it left English in a bit of a mess as far as its vowel system went. So it was called the Great Vowel Shift, or the Great Vowel Change. In some cases, I prefer the shift. But yeah, it was a whole crazy mess of nonsense going on with English's sound system. But it left the strong verbs in English much harder to predict. So that's one of the reasons.
Similar vowel shifts occurred in Semitic languages, like the Canaanite shift. That actually is why in Hebrew you would the word for king is Moloch or Melech, and in Ugaritic it's Milku. It's because of that vowel shift. So that's also why it is Milku in Akkadian as well.
Mm.
Yeah, vowel shifts are pretty common. In fact, sometimes they're more common, they're more complicated. Like the English vowel shift was pretty much just a one-to-one. Every long vowel turned into a particular diphthong with very few exceptions. But other times, vowel shifts can happen like vowels will become fronted before labial or labiodental sounds, or they'll get backed in the context of like pharyngeal or glottal sounds and things like that. And so it'll be very context dependent. So in cases like that, you can end up with a vowel system in a daughter language that's very far away from the vowel system in the parent language. So English doesn't have a whole lot of that going. I don't know of any major vowel changes that were strongly context dependent. So English managed to get away with fairly simple vowel changes, at least recently.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds bad.
Yeah, I haven't really noticed much of that myself either. Not for. I don't think we've really had much change in a while either.
Well, it does seem like there's some reason to say that having a writing system has a tendency to slow language change a little bit, but English has changed much faster than many languages. So,
even in recent years,
to some extent, I mean, if you look at say, like let's say you look at Norwegian and you compare it to say Old Norse.
Okay.
There's really not much difference. If you speak Norwegian, chances are that you can struggle through an Old Norse text. If you speak modern English, you cannot read Old English without taking a course. You simply cannot.
Very true. And you know what? You're right. When I'm saying recently, I'm thinking like within the past 20, 30 years sort of thing.
Well, that's not...
Now, if you're familiar with German, you can kind of parse your way through Old English to a degree.
Yeah, but if you don't have any other Germanic languages in your repertoire besides modern English, Old English will just be incomprehensible to you.
Yeah.
30 to 40 years isn't a whole lot of time
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
for any language, really.
It's not a whole lot of time in general. Period.
Right. So I wouldn't expect to see much change that a speaker would notice. But there are changes that are occurring in English. There are phonetic mergers that are occurring in various places. There are English in informal contexts is becoming increasingly pro-drop. So that's an interesting thing that I've noticed. So when you look at
so is growing at a seemingly crazy rate as well.
Well, the thing about slang, though, is that it tends to just also drop out as fast as it came in.
Yeah,
and it tends to it usually leaves the language essentially unchanged. Slang is usually more of a social marker than anything else. I
got to tell you, though.
Yeah.
In Canada, we now have in our Canadian version of the whatever the fuck dictionary, they now have LOL in there.
Oh, goodness.
Double, which is the type of coffee you order from Tim Hortons.
Okay.
Double cream, double sugar.
Oh, I know.
It's actually in the dictionary now.
I'm not terribly surprised. But one of the things is, again, dictionaries tend to be descriptive. The idea of a dictionary is if someone uses a term, you can then go to the dictionary to find out what they probably meant.
Yes.
The idea behind a dictionary...
Probably excellent way of saying it.
Right. The idea behind a dictionary is not that it will tell you what words are supposed to be used and in what ways. Dictionaries describe. If someone says, "Oh, you used that word wrong," and you're like, "Okay, how so?" And they're like, "Well, in the dictionary it says this." Stop them right there. That is not what dictionaries are for. Dictionaries are not to tell you how to use a word. They're to describe how words are commonly used.
That's right. Common vernacular. Yeah.
So
usage, not meaning.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it should be telling you what the meaning is of the common
and meaning of that usage.
Right.
Just so you can get a point across.
Right. But it doesn't mean that if you use a word in a way other than how the dictionary defines it, that you've used it incorrectly. Like I said,
that's right.
The only way you can really say that you've used language incorrectly is if you fail to get your message across.
Holy shit. Hey, Nathaniel. How you doing, buddy?
Hey. Now, if you're learning a new language and you got your meaning across, but you said it in a way that native speakers find strange, you should consider that to basically be wrong.
Yeah.
But that's for learning a target language that you don't already speak as a native language.
They'll generally set you straight too.
Right. At least I hope they do, because I hope that whenever I speak someone else's language, I hope that they correct me if I mess up, because otherwise, how the heck am I supposed to figure it out?
Yeah.
Like, if you're trying to learn a new language and you're sensitive about being corrected, maybe it's time to grow a thicker skin, because people should be corrected.
A little bit,
yeah. Because there's really no way to grow except to learn and take correction when it's necessary.
Criticism in general. Just learn to accept it. Like I always tell people, you know what? The best thing about being proven wrong is you're no longer wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Why stay wrong? It's like I said in the show. It's like, why stay wrong?
Yeah.
What good is it to you to simply find a wrong answer and then stick with it because you like it?
Yeah, you might as well just smash yourself in the head with a book or something.
Right. Like it doesn't help. It doesn't help you grow as a person, as a professional.
Be careful. You're harming every single mythicist right now.
Yeah.
Hey, I like some of the work of those guys, man. So, it's interesting stuff, definitely. Whether or not I agree with some of it, I agree with some of what Carrier's come up with. I've agreed with some of what Ehrman's come up with. I mean, there's more out there too.
So I'll say this.
Interesting to me.
I think there's plenty of debate to be had about what Jesus of Nazareth did, when he did it, where he did it, things like that. I honestly don't have a whole lot of time for the idea that he's simply a fictional character who was made up much later.
See, that's kind of the direction I lean, to be honest.
I think that's the direction that most, I don't know about the biblical scholarship per se, but I would say that in historical circles where it's, just historians, there's really not much debate as to whether or not there was a person about whom the New Testament is based.
Yeah, there are working at a university, there are only 3 professors in the entire world that doubt his existence.
Yeah, that sounds
Not-
pretty reasonable.
Not other PhDs not employed. There's about 5.
Doesn't mean anything to me because people have been that way on other subjects, and those 3 people turned out to be right.
Right, but the thing is, most of the time, if you're not an expert in the field and all the experts
Which I'm
say
not.
one thing, and almost all the experts, which is essentially the case here, say X, you probably shouldn't believe Y. You should either say, I don't know enough about it, or you should just probably side with the experts.
That's generally what I do say, but I lean to my own sort of understandings of these sorts of things. And I think, why would this one particular character in this, what I call mythology, be any different from any other characters created in other mythologies?
Well,
that's the way I kind of look at it.
The thing is that characters in legendary literature are not fictional because they are in legendary literature.
Well,
so for instance, there are characters from like various mythologies around the world that have been found to have been based on historical characters.
Oh, sure. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So, like, one of the problems is that while there is a significant time gap between the first mentions of Jesus and
it's not that significant.
It's not that. Yeah, that's the thing. From a historical standpoint, it's a pretty small gap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the idea that someone made up an entire human in 30 years and then got people to believe that he was a real human, even
20
people
years.
Or 20, yeah, sorry. And got people who would have known if he were a real person or not to believe it. It's not super plausible. There probably had to be a guy about whom some of the broad strokes are at least true. And like I said, I don't get into exactly to what degree, say, the Gospels, especially the Synoptic Gospels, are accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But the broad outline has to be something that was probably about right. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have spread outside of, or probably just wouldn't have spread, because we also know that Christianity basically spread out from Judea pretty darn soon after the events depicted in the New Testament.
The People's Front of Judea, or the Judean People's Front? Wolf nipple chips.
No, the Judean People's Front are a bunch of splitters.
Another reason I love you guys.
So yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons why I have very little sympathy for the mythicist position, because it's just like you honestly expect me to believe that a mass movement started around a guy who never existed 20 years after his alleged death. I mean, a huge proportion of the people around would have just been like, dude, that's just not a guy. That's just not a guy.
Is it impossible for something like that to happen, do you think? Or
I think it would be unprecedented.
It's
okay.
It's not completely impossible. It is unprecedented for that quick, at least as far as I know.
Yeah.
How about improbable?
Yeah, but
it's extremely improbable.
Yeah. But when it comes to like legendarizing figures within a short time, we can look at David Koresh.
Yeah.
David So
or
Carrier,
Jim Jones.
Yeah. So when Carrier does his reference class for his Bayesian calculation, it's really weird. And on
I'll admit that is true.
What he does is his reference class is the rank-Raglan archetype. And his argument is that if a figure scores 12 or higher on the rank-Raglan archetype, then they can be for his priors placed into a mythic category along with other mythical figures. David Koresh, within 10 years of Waco, scores 14.
Unbelievable. Really? Yep. I didn't know that. That's insane.
Also, Maya just said, awesome, I now believe in Romulus. So here's one of the things, though.
Maya's awesome.
Here's one of the things, though. Our earliest accounts of the Roman founding myth are like centuries after the alleged events.
Yeah.
And they're composed centuries after the alleged events.
There's also a really, really interesting thing about how they always portray those events too. And it's that unlike with the Gospels, when they're presenting Jesus, and I don't think the Gospels are very accurate at all, but when they're presenting Jesus, they
You're not the only one.
present him in a specific time in the past.
Yeah.
They don't do that with Romulus.
Yeah. It's just sometime long ago this happened, and there was conflict with the Etruscans or something. And it's displaced in time. which is a common thing that you get with mythology that isn't based in actual events. Because the thing is, mythology is often based in actual events, like even if the mythology is fairly literally accurate. So one of the things I talked about in a video was that mythology isn't a category of fiction. It's a category of writing that has particular kinds of meaning. It's writing about how the world ought to operate and why it operates as it does now.
And lots of it is full of actual historical events too.
Right. So for instance, a lot of the stories about the early years of the United States of America are mythology. But most of the stories are also pretty much literally true, at least in the basic details, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the battles described, the personalities involved are more or less accurate from a literal standpoint. But it's still mythology because these are stories about why the government and people of the United States are what they are, why they do what they do.
Sure. You think about the whole, like some of the stories about George Washington that came out of the, from back in the day with the war and stuff like that. All that stuff happened, but some of the stories surrounding Washington could have been stretched or exaggerated.
Yeah.
What I'm
Maybe
saying
get
is,
your mythological stuff.
My case in point for actually that is to use Abraham Lincoln, because there was enough folklore that developed about Abraham Lincoln that he fits all 22 points of the rank Raglan archetype. He fits more than Jesus does.
That's crazy.
well,
and at least we knew he was at least real.
Well, there is one thing I want to point out is that there is a difference between legend and myth. Mm-hmm. Legend has to do with how likely true something is going to be, whereas myth, in a lot of contexts, actually depends on the purpose of the story being told. So, for instance, I could make a mythology that is completely 100% actually factual. But if my purpose is to give you some moral lesson or explain why something is the way it is in terms of like society or nature, I've still made a myth. It's a true myth because myths could be true.
Yep.
They often aren't. But
or have elements of it anyways.
Well, they could even be entirely true. I don't know that it's ever happened, but it's not logically impossible for a myth to be completely factual. The important part for the mythology is that it have the meaning that is intended. So, for instance, if I talk about, like, we'll go back to like the United States kind of civic mythology.
What would you call, before we do that, let me ask you a quick question. What would you consider the Paul Bunyan? Would that be a myth or legend? Or
I would call that a legend that falls into the folklore category.
Okay.
Because the thing about Paul Bunyan is that none of the stories really give you a moral lesson. No, they're simply fun folkloric. Right, they're just fun folkloric accountings of the various exploits of Paul Bunyan, or somewhat tongue-in-cheek explanations for how a river got there or something. Like, no one actually believes that river formed because it's the trail of Paul Bunyan's axe, right?
Yeah.
Or that the Oxbow Lakes are actually where Babe the Blue Ox laid down to take a nap. Like, no one actually thinks that.
Right.
So that's why I would say it's not a myth, because myths have to...
What about Davy Crockett?
Well, Davy Crockett is a real person.
Okay.
So, in fact, Davy Crockett was a senator.
That's right.
So a lot of the stories about Davy Crockett, though, are legendary. And I would say some of them probably are mythological, because Davy Crockett became sort of a symbol for rugged individualist American expansionism into the West.
Right. Okay, sure. Yeah.
So I would say some of those probably are mythological. In fact, some of the true stories about him may be mythological, because they may be popular stories for reasons like that.
Yeah.
So it's actually one of the things I don't like about mythicism is just the name. It should really be more called legendism, but I guess that doesn't roll off the tongue the same way.
Yeah,
actually, sounds better if you ask me.
I've actually got somewhere right here. I've got the original 2 books that actually coined the term back in the 1930s in their prints. But they coined it basically as a tongue-in-cheek term to just label people like Arthur Dreves and Georg Brandes from Denmark and Germany, who both argued against the historical existence of Jesus. And they actually Arthur Dreves caused such an uproar in the early 1900s that there was a public debate held in February, on February 1st, that went from, or January 31st, that went into till like 6 a.m. of February 1st. So it was over a day long of nothing but straight debate over the existence of Jesus. He ended up getting over 80 published responses within 10 years.
What?
And,
Wow.
And
That's got to be a record.
On top of that, his work was so influential that Vladimir Lenin, when he read it, ended up taking it up, and mythicism actually became enforced by the state in all universities in the Soviet Union.
Man.
Soviet Russia.
Yep.
Here's something about Soviet Russia. So a lot of times, a lot of creationists like to go with some kind of weird ad hominem about evolution, saying, "Oh, that's what inspired Lenin and Stalin." And it's like, the Soviets were famously anti-evolution for most of their history, right? It caused famines.
Yeah.
Like the degree to which they were like, no, evolution is not a thing. It's like, yeah. And also, look, I'm skeptical of claims that Hitler was a sincerely believing Christian. Basically, I think that he was critical enough in enough of his writings of the religion that I don't think he personally accepted the truth claims of any particular branch of Christianity.
No, but he still was a God believer.
That's probably true. He was probably a theist.
He had it in their motto.
He was probably a theist, but on the other hand, a lot of creationists, which is the reason I'm bringing it up, will also say that evolution was the reason that the Nazis did what they did. But it's like, look, a lot of eugenicists used evolution as a basis for their rhetoric, but Hitler wasn't one of them. Hitler definitely was anti-evolution, and he had a lot of books about it burned during his mass book burnings, and he spoke out against the theory on several occasions.
Yeah.
It's like, I disagree with people who say that you can blame Christianity for the Holocaust, because I don't think you can.
No.
But equally,
that had nothing to do with it.
Right. You also can't blame evolution for it, which I know a lot of creationists try to do.
No, that's ridiculous.
It's extremely ridiculous. Now, if it had been a bunch of eugenicists from the United States, which there were a lot of at the time, and they tended to be much more pro-evolution, and if they had committed genocide, then maybe you'd have a point. And you know what? There were some pretty dark things done by American eugenicists who, in fact, did accept evolution. There were things like forced sterilizations that occurred, usually racially targeted, things like that. Look, I'm not going to say that eugenicists who accepted evolution didn't do anything bad, but they definitely did not cause the Holocaust.
There's bad people with every paint of stripe paint. There's bad people everywhere. Doesn't matter what the ideology is, what your country you're from, what race you are. I don't play the race card personally. I think there's one race to me, the human race. We just happen to come in a variety like every other fucking species, but there's bad people everywhere. So
with the race thing, currently basically the science and genetics would say that there really aren't any distinct subspecies in Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens form a pretty continuous group, and the only reason that we see people as distinct is because for historical reasons, people from very different parts of the world have ended up in discrete populations in certain places. Mm-hmm. Yep. But if you were to walk from one of those places to the other, you wouldn't see a discrete change in race. And but the other thing is, you can't quite say that race simply doesn't exist, because it is actually a social construct. Just like languages are a social construct.
Sure.
Race has become a social construct in many places. And so it can't simply be said to not exist. It's just that it exists as a matter of human societies and not biology.
That's a much better way to say it, for sure.
But of course,
it exists as social constructs and not really biological.
Right. But of course, like most social constructs, it is constrained to some degree by biology. So for instance, people tend to guess with very good accuracy what race someone would be identified with when presented with that person. Okay, most of the time, people can correctly guess that this person is, say, black or white or East Asian or whatever. Mm-hmm. And their guesses will usually conform to the racial categories common in their society, but also will tend to be the one that person would identify themselves with in that society. So there is a biological underpinning, but the thing is that it relies on this kind of artificial grouping of people from very specific places. So for instance, if we take the United States has had waves of immigration from specific places like West Africa or East Asia. And so that's why in America, the three most common racial categories, quote unquote, are black, white, and Asian. Mm-hmm. Even though lots of people from Asia don't look anything like, say, a Chinese or a Korean or a Japanese person.
Right. They could be from India.
Right. And the thing is, that's actually one of those areas where, because that's not one of those groups that had one of those, historical immigrations back when race was one of the primary ways in which America adopted its various policies. Like, there are various racially disparate enforcements and policies in the United States, but none of them are spelling out race as a cause or excuse for enforcement.
Of course. Yeah.
But when this sort of trichotomy between the common racial identities in America was established, there were.
Oh, yeah.
There were laws spelling out racial identity as an aspect of the law.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why, when it comes to people from the subcontinent, Americans don't get it right as often. That's actually why there was a famous, or not famous, there was a news story not that long ago, I think it was a couple of years ago, about a man who was he was Indian. He was trying to get into med school, but his grades weren't good enough. So he joined the African American Students Union, and he changed his first name to Jamal. And he was accepted into medical school because he met the average. He was well within the average for the minimum for a black student to get into medical school. And because he was Indian, they couldn't tell he wasn't black.
What? Really?
Yeah. All he did was he joined the African American Students Union, changed his first name to Jamal, and suddenly he was in medical school.
Oh, jeez. What the? That's all he had to do.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I mean, he could have studied and improved his grades, but it was easier to just join a student organization and change his name.
Damn.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. It turns out he also flunked out of medical school.
Oh, what? Oh, my goodness. I haven't heard about this. That's funny.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, there's actually a bit of a controversy in a lot of American schools right now because it's actually the case. Like, it's no longer really a secret, but it is extremely hard to get into a good school if you're Jewish or Asian. Mm-hmm. It's fairly difficult if you're white, but the entry requirements if you are black are significantly lower. But what that means is also that black students have an extremely high dropout rate or failure rate from colleges because they're not accepting people who actually meet what should be the minimum standards because they don't want to look racist. But what ends up happening is you're accepting people who aren't actually cut out to be at that school.
Right.
Who would have done better if they, say, had the time to do something like build up their grades at, say, a community college and then apply later to transfer those credits over. Instead, they're just getting into high-level schools with grades that simply don't qualify them for them, which only sets them up for failure.
Right, which could have a devastating mental effects on them, too, in the long run.
Right. In fact, actually, it was there were a bunch of schools in, I think, Massachusetts who recently, there was a pretty big controversy when it came out that they had actually stated privately, but they had stated quotas for Jewish students to stop too many of them getting in.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, they didn't want to seem racist by accepting all the Jewish applicants. So they were just excluding some of them.
Why not accept applicants that are
that's about badass
suited to be there?
So what ended up happening is that they didn't want to seem racist, so they created a racist policy.
Yeah, it's just exactly the same thing, Chris.
Yep. They otherwise would have accepted so many Jewish people that they thought it would have made them seem like they were pro-Jewish. So instead, they just excluded Jewish people.
How about we're pro people that should be here? People that are smart enough to be here.
Well, the thing
academic enough to be here.
There are also pretty well substantiated reports of colleges having a maximum quota for East Asian students. Because again, that
happens
so
here.
Yeah, in the Anglosphere. So look, different subcultures within any country are going to value education. Well, that's a thing.
It's a new name of my band.
Oh.
I know, but I've very rarely heard that used, and I got to say, that's the new band name,
Nice.
Anglosphere.
So, within the Anglosphere, certain subcultures have a tendency to put a much higher emphasis on grades and education than others. The two groups that tend to have the highest emphasis on these tend to be Ashkenazi Jews and East Asians. And so they tend to get, by a pretty big margin too.
Here's an idea. If you don't want to seem racist, don't even ask race on the application. Yes,
well, that's the thing.
You could end up with all one race and it would look
a good
bad,
idea.
Right? But it's you get your applicants based on merit only, and you don't even know what race they are. You're like, hey, we don't
Just
even
ask
ask
them,
on the application. Fucking
why do you think you should be here?
But here's the thing. So in that thing where there was the Indian guy who just pretended to be black, the application didn't ask him for his race, but his name on the application was Jamal, and in his application, one of his extracurricular activities was having joined the African American Students Union. He didn't say he was black. He didn't lie. No one asked.
Oh my god, that is
no
awesome.
one asked if he was black. So one of the things is, it's not an easy thing to do a racially blind acceptance thing, because what are you going to do? Say, I joined ethnic student union? I mean, are you going to ask every single applicant to just use a randomly assigned number instead of a name? I mean, people ask for essays, and you can give clues about things like various identities in your essay. Like if you talk about having grown up poor in Harlem, well, is it 100% proof that you're black? No, but I mean, come on. There's a pretty high chance that you are. So it's very hard to actually blind things like college admission to things like race and sex, because it's too easy to get those clues from things. Because one of the things is, living in a society like most humans have, where those things are important parts about someone, as far as knowing who that person is, they're coded into a lot of things that you might not otherwise think about. So it's usually not that hard to accurately guess how someone is going to identify in either case, even without asking for that information. In fact, actually, most Americans can, at greater than statistical, like at a statistically significant rate, successfully identify the sexual orientation of other people. They're not great at it. They're not as good at it as they are for, say, racial identity, but they're at better than you would expect for just random chance.
Interesting.
So, yeah, there are a lot of social cues that go into how you express yourself that inform others about how you probably perceive yourself.
People definitely get what my orientation is now. It's actually really interesting, though. They never got it when I was still Christian.
Well, you probably were practicing at making sure they didn't.
Not really. Not really. It was mostly because I barely noticed myself. But I'm pansexual, so I liked everybody.
No, that just means you really, really like frying pans.
A little too much.
Frying
Sometimes they look pretty good.
Frying pans are people too.
Yeah. Chris, when did you realize that that's what you were?
When I was 16, and there was a really, really cute pastor.
Oh,
I thought you were going to say a really cute pan.
I didn't really end up exploring that though until after I went to college, and then I went.
A lot of stuff comes awake at that point.
Yeah. Now I'm actually involved in the drag community. So.
Oh, cool! Right on. Right on. That's cool. Guys, I got to get going.
Aww. Wait,
I know.
The after party hasn't even been as long as the actual show yet.
I know, which is weird. But I have a prior commitment, and they're already starting to text me now. So.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's not my fault the show went long. But.
Hey, no, that was on me. That was on me.
No, dude, it was awesome.
No, I had fun too.
I could have gone all night with you, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah.
But now you got to have me on your show sometime.
All right. Hey, you know what? You're probably working. I was going to say I'm doing a live stream tomorrow at noon.
Noon your time is 11 my time, and yes, I will still be at work.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Send me a DM on Twitter. Let me know when it would be a good time for you, because chances are, if it's a good time for you, it's probably a decent time for me.
Okay. Yeah, we're an hour difference, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah. But check out my channel if you haven't already. I've got
me.
The audience. The audience, man. Come on. So yeah, that's what I'm saying to the audience. Is like, hey, check out the channel.
Definitely check.
It's almost all science stuff. I did recently put up a couple of art things because I do art as well. So, which reminds me, if you need someone to do CGI stuff, consider asking. I do CGI art on commission, so that is a thing I also do.
Oh, do you? Okay, yeah. We need to talk.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. If I can even work in an intro and an outro to these things, but
you definitely could if you wanted to.
Okay. I don't know how to do it. I'm total fucking. When it comes,
I'm not totally sure how to do it on Streamlabs, but I'm pretty sure there is a way. And
it's
if you
StreamYard.
want,
it's not even
StreamYard, yeah, StreamYard. I'm not sure about StreamYard, but at the very least, you could have an intro and outro for anything that you do that isn't live streamed.
That's the thing. I only do my talks. There will come a point where I'll start to do stuff like that, but that's still at least a year away.
Well, check out
that a bitch. I remember somebody that may or may not be a floating eyeball suggesting something about, oh, Neil, you might want to get like an intro or something like that for season 3, and you're like, oh no, grumble.
Well, I don't know how to do it. That's why I don't know how to actually incorporate it in.
You got people, man. We're fucking connected. There's people who can do this shit for you, man.
I know. Speaking of connected, Dino, I know Aaron personally.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I've drank with the guy. We've hung out. We've done all kinds of shit together. So,
you know what? If I can ask a favor, see if he'll watch some of my stuff, and if he wants to do some kind of collaboration, let me know.
I absolutely will.
Aaron and I don't get along.
Oh, I'm aware. So look, here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, Aaron has something he's very good at, but he's not quite as good when he goes outside that, and he goes outside of that perhaps more than I would like.
When he starts repeating the oft-repeated phrase that bats are birds in Leviticus, you can tell he doesn't read Hebrew. They're not birds. They're oaf. They're flying things.
Flying things, which you're right.
Yeah.
But that could be misinterpreted as birds.
It was misinterpreted as birds in earlier translations, but
sure, that's probably what he's going on.
In academia, it's widely known that they were smart enough to be like, yeah, they're not birds.
I hear he gives good hugs.
I never hugged him, but I got a good firm handshake from the guy.
Okay.
I'd give him a fucking hug.
You can try.
Might need to get a ladder or something, but
he's my size, dude. He's a big man.
Okay.
Like the two of us I have a picture of the two of us standing out in front of a restaurant, and it's like we look like we should be wearing Sons of Anarchy shirts. So I'm going to have designed Sons of Atheism and put them.
Okay.
Those suckers would be awesome.
Also, Chris, send me a message or something about when would be a good time to work on some kind of a thing about textual history and text and manuscript families, because that'd be a cool thing to have.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
sure thing.
But
a lot of my specialization lies in Old Testament, but I'm very familiar with at least the interpolation history in a lot of the New Testament.
Well, that's good, because I don't really care for the purposes of this about the interpretation of the text as a text.
Yeah.
Like I'm just looking at it as a set of characters that has varied over time in a nested hierarchy.
Yep. Okay.
So
sure.
Yeah.
You ever delved in any Kabbalistic stuff, Chris?
I've read some intro stuff on Kabbalistic literature, but not a whole lot, just because it's far enough removed from the periods that I usually work with.
And it's out there too.
Yeah. People tend to think of it as being much more ancient than it is.
Yeah,
I know, which is weird.
It's basically it's a medieval invention, isn't it?
Yeah, middle or early to Middle Ages is when it first starts. You start having like the major developments in it. But
being raised as a Jew, I was introduced to it quite young, and I just grew up calling it Jew woo.
I mean, yeah, basically, it's another thing that's like that is when people are like, "Oh, the Bible doesn't talk about Lilith." It's like, yeah, that's because Lilith wasn't invented for millennia after the Genesis was written.
Well, there's the Lilatu
there's the demon, but
in Akkadian literature, and there is like one mention of the term Lilith in the Hebrew Bible, but there's like no Lilith.
Yeah,
there's not linked to the garden story.
There's no character that is like the Lilith of later medieval Jewish folklore in the Bible.
Yeah, the first mention of Lilith in that regard is actually in a satire.
Yeah, and she's like a succubus or something.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
isn't she kind of winged? She has wings or some shit.
It varies.
The original carvings of her.
Yeah, it varies on depending on the depiction, but the early one was that she was presented as Adam's first wife, and then she didn't. I think it was like she didn't want to be with Adam anymore. So then, basically, there was a deal that she made with God, and she became a demoness, basically.
Right, that's what it was. That's where the winged shit came in.
Yeah, but she wasn't excluded from the Bible because there was no character that can be reasonably identified as that character in the Bible. And like the one mention of that word that is related to Lilith comes in a verse where like it's talking about desert creatures, like it talks about vultures and snakes and things, and it's like there's just as fair a chance that it's an unidentified but actual living animal from the desert. Like, for all we know, it could have been a very specific kind of scorpion, and it just happens to have that name. I don't know, because no one knows what the word really means. So
all right.
If anyone wants to see a good video on it, Lawrence from Milwaukee Atheist did a really, really good video on it. I helped to do some of the research for it.
Oh, cool.
Gave him a few things, but yeah, he did mostly. It is an excellent video.
Okay. Well, I think I plugged everything I'm going to plug.
Okay. Welcome back, IQ.
Yep, wrong button. What I was going to say, Neil, is someone who I think you should introduce to these gentlemen is Darren Slade of the Sherm Journal. He does some pretty good work on historicities and critical acclaims of the Bible and stuff. And with their linguistic prowess, I think they would be a good match to sit down and have a little powwow.
I'm actually I am familiar with him.
Nice.
I had him on my show.
Mostly through Lawrence, because he was
quite agnostic about the skeptic community, and like he didn't even know who Seth Andrews was. So
right. It's okay. Seth didn't know who he was either when I talked to Seth.
Getting him introduced to people, I think, is critical because he's got some amazing shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's stop it, Chris. I love your fucking hair. Quit making me jealous.
The best part about this is all the curling in it is natural.
Mine too.
Yeah, it's really great when you
look at us. We're like, look at this hair.
Love it.
I think just because of our hair, Chris and I need to start a band.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure if you're into psychedelic music. Those are the bands.
Man, Pink Floyd is one of my favorites all time.
Early Floyd.
Oh yes, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, Amagama, that kind of shit.
So you two are going to be the founding members of the new band Anglosphere.
Floyd 2.0. Anglosphere, yeah.
Right, that's your next band name.
Nice.
And that's what we call a callback. Well, you can have a second band. That happens.
That's true too. Yeah.
Actually, Bent Hovind, who is the Kent with Bent guy, he's in two bands right now.
I do vocal work for other guys too. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Actually, that's one of the things about his current band, Copper Magma, that just released their EP on their website, which, by the way, coppermagma.com, go check it out. I'm chilling for Bent, whatever.
Hey, go for it, man. I'm all about the music because I could chill up my SoundCloud too. So
my one criticism for them is like, you got to increase the vocals in the mix. And he's like, nah, the singer doesn't want to. I'm like, okay, but no one can hear him, so you should either just not have a vocalist or you should put him in the mix. It is what he wants. He wants no one to be able to hear him.
oh wow,
That's a bit like the band Pyramidal. They're a space rock band, and the singer is always just in the background singing. It's like, I think there's a voice. I can't hear it over the obnoxiously loud guitar, but I can hear a voice, I think.
If you dig like the space rocky kind of, let's say I'll call it like a sci-fi rock and cross it with some rockabilly type sort of thing, but not quite. There's a band called shit. What are they called now? Hang on. It's a fucking weird name. They're from San Jose. I don't even know if they're still together. Fuck, why can't I remember shit when I want to?
I feel it so much.
It's right there. For fuck's sakes.
It's gonna hit you while you're taking a shit.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because when it comes to my training as a guitarist, I came directly out of Michigan psychedelic scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So my guitar playing is just absolutely alien to people sometimes.
I know where to look. Hang on a second here because I got their album.
And Maya helpfully posted the Milwaukee Atheist Lilith video. Thanks, Maya. Maya's great.
Yes.
Maya's awesome.
Yeah, Maya's actually in my next video. I mention her because she's my previous video. Things that aren't dinosaurs #1 is where I mention her because she was the one who gave me the idea for that video.
That's funny, Neil, because if you catch her on Mixer, her name's actually Awesome Maya.
Well, there you go.
Very apropos.
I remember that. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, they're called Shake Before Us.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of them. Actually.
Yeah, they've got like theremin and shit in their music. It's fucking cool as shit.
Yeah, I've always wanted to get a theremin for.
They're cool, man.
They are cool.
Really, really, really hard to play.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's a bunch of wire with electricity going through it.
Yeah, the actual playing area is just open air. There's no markings for where any notes are actually going to be or anything. You just have to just kind of know.
It's actually really cool to watch professional theremin players and how they have specific
hand shapes.
Yeah, hand shapes and distances. It's like robotic the way they play. It's really cool.
The two tunes I recommend checking out right off the hop for them is Angels of Altamont and Devil May Care. Great fucking tunes.
See, everyone's loving on Maya in the chat, understandably, or I guess, and so are we. So Maya, just start making content or something, get out there.
Or, even if you want to like work your way in, start coming into some of my after parties, Maya. You're always welcome.
Maya's been on a few of my streams.
Has she?
I have had Maya on camera. Yeah, that's how awesome I am.
The fuck? Do I smell?
She's been on at least 2 streams. She's been on a third. I'm not remembering a third one off the top, but
I think Maya's just a bit like me and just floats in the background most of the time and just pops on.
Which you shouldn't be doing because you've got a lot of fucking knowledge in that head of yours that you need to share with people.
I just don't like getting in the YouTube community anymore, especially because I did like a 8-hour worth debunking of a Carrier lecture, and the amount of crap you get from his fanboys.
Oh goodness, yeah, Carrier.
I dig Carrier. I just don't agree with everything.
Well, so the problem with Carrier is that a lot of his fans are his fans because his conclusions are in line with their confirmation bias.
Bingo. Yeah. Thank you.
I
plan on having him on one day.
That'd be cool. I have Chris on too.
I refuse to have any direct contact with him.
Keeping it to the literature.
Keeping it to the literature, and primarily because of his sexual harassment.
Ah,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
There
he
you
got
go.
banned. He got banned from Skepticon for it.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
What's
and then
everyone doing that shit these days?
and then he sued his victims.
Nice, classy.
And that's when all of the emails came out that confirmed that he actually did it.
Wow.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's part of the whole discovery thing, right? They're like, oh, hey, you gonna sue me? Well, I got this.
It actually showed that when it came to his academic dishonesty, he was literally trading sex for graduate school admissions letters.
Nice. That's classy.
He's trading sex for recommendation letters.
Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me?
I'm not. There's actual email evidence of it from him.
That paints him in a whole new light for me.
Yeah.
Classy right there.
That's fucking horrible.
Meanwhile, he was doing all this while he was married and cheating on his wife. And then when that all came out, he came out as polyamorous to try and save face.
Oh, that's complicated.
Who was it?
How is
Something
that?
happened. There was an act. Something like that happened with an actor recently, didn't they? Like some guy accused him of molesting him or something, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gay now," and it was like it seemed like an attempt to deflect attention.
Oh yeah. I think it was Kevin Spacey.
It was Kevin Spacey. Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I've been accused of sexual misconduct. I choose now to live my life as a gay man. World, aren't I great? Look, here's a rainbow flag." It's like that doesn't really fix the problem, dude.
No.
Nope.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I mean, like, yeah. Although I will say the fact that he thought that would work is one of the reasons why now when like someone's like, "Oh, this football player is gay," and I'm just like, I don't care.
No, it's that he thought that would work is insulting.
Well, what I'm saying though is that the fact that he thought that would work is basically goes to show you that it's not really a controversial thing anymore to come out as gay.
No,
it's now the kind of thing that people are like, "Oh, right on," which is why I now
another one.
Yeah, which is why I now no longer care when there's a news story saying, "Oh, this is the first openly gay person in this major league sports," and I'm just like, I don't care.
Nobody cares anymore.
Nobody cares.
Welcome. How you doing?
Yeah,
it's like the norm now, and it should have been the whole time, but.
Yeah.
The only time I really start caring about it is when it happens in public office, like in a political position. That's when
I can see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's actually significant because the majority of people that get elected are elected by predominantly Christians and for Christian purposes.
Oh, wait, no, that way. Doorknob Head has donuts, and he's willing to trade sex for donuts if anyone's interested.
That's
just
fair.
saying.
That's fair.
Well,
donuts are pretty fucking tempting.
So I'd
at least give a good hand job for a donut.
The thing about
maybe
trading,
use the donut.
So the thing about trading for sex is, I actually don't think in all categories that's something that we should like ban or anything. But there's a difference between saying, "Oh, hey, I'll give you this donut if you have sex with me," and saying, "Hey, I'll write you a recommendation for entry into university."
Of course. I wasn't trying to.
The thing is, and so that's one of the things is I would like to decriminalize prostitution because I don't think it helps anyone.
Yeah.
Especially not the prostitutes.
Yeah.
It definitely isn't helping them. But
it's almost decriminalized here where I live.
That's good.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there are also cases where I don't think that you should be able to make a trade for the thing that you're looking for. Like in cases like an academic recommendation. Because the idea behind an academic recommendation is supposed to be, this is someone who is intellectually capable and has enough of a work ethic to succeed in the program they're applying for.
Right.
Anything that
is
isn't
most certainly on the front lines of decriminalizing donut whores.
I consider it the height of academic dishonesty to do that to trade sex for a recommendation letter.
Or money, for that matter.
Fuck yeah.
Or money.
Oh, fuck yeah.
You have to, in my opinion, you earn that recommendation letter or you don't get one.
Yeah. And
that's right.
On the other hand, if I also think that, people shouldn't be overly stingy with them. Like if you're someone who looks like they could succeed, then your professor should write you a recommendation letter. Because I've also known some professors who were just ridiculously stingy with those things. They're like, almost no one gets my recommendation letter. It's like, well, why? Like, do you honestly think that these people who you're turning away wouldn't have been successful in the program? Really? Because they're pretty darn smart and they work hard. So what?
Yeah, you
you
should
want-
trade for a recommendation letter? A good fucking job. Potential.
Speaking of which,
also, if you're
I need
one
to
of
work
those
on that.
professors that does, oh well, I don't give my recommendations on these. What if this person that you could have given a recommendation to ends up getting one from someone else, ends up somewhere, comes back and shows you up? Then what are you going to do?
I mean, it's possible.
Exactly. They often say the students outdo the teachers eventually, right?
Well, that's supposed to be the idea behind the progress of, academics is
Of
supposed
course.
to be that, you get to build on the work that came before you. So if you're a professor who doesn't have students that are surpassing them, you're probably just doing it wrong. Like, why are you a professor? Why are you teaching things?
Or you're in a stagnant field.
Well, that
Right.
could be too, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get out of here. I have stuff
I got
I
shit
need
to
to take
do.
care of.
People are
But yeah,
screaming at me.
everyone.
Where the fuck are you?
Neil's got people climbing in his windows like, where's the joy?
If they can get up here, I'm fucking neighbors with Spider-Man. That's all I can do.
Wait, he lives
His
in New
weed's
York.
that good.
I know, and I'm nowhere near New York, so I'm like literally on the other side.
All right, but yeah, come to my channel at 5 p.m. Pacific / 8 p.m. Eastern for the premiere of my next video.
All right.
I am subbed and followed, Dino. So
Awesome.
Is that
get a thumbs up in my book, man.
tomorrow?
Awesome. Yeah, tomorrow. It's going to be the next Genesis Apologetics. It's about natural selection and genetics.
Sweet.
I'll tell you now, buckle in because it's a 24-minute video.
So
That's not
mine
too
are almost 2 hours, most of them. So who cares?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yeah, but you didn't spend 80 hours or whatever animating your video, so I did.
Hey. No, nothing is gonna beat my 4-hour-long single video takedown of Richard Carrier, which involves us turning his lecture into a drinking game,
Nice.
and then having Animal Cracker story time in the middle of it.
Animal Cracker.
I do.
That's fucking awesome.
That's bold.
Wait, do I? I do have a, what was it? 5-hour live debunk of Kent Hovind.
Sweet.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nice.
There's someone that got me beat.
Yeah, so the short story there is a previous live debunk that I did with my normal co-host. He was like, "Oh, I was kind of sad that we cut it off a little early," and I was like, "All right, next time we won't." And that's what happened.
All right.
All right, I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you.
Thanks again, Dino, for joining me today, man. That was awesome.
Absolutely.
And Chris, thanks for jumping in.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Hey, anytime. Anytime. Your knowledge is always required.
I don't know.
Well,
My random knowledge of philosophy is not.
well, that's okay. I'm about in the same boat with that stuff. So, but yeah, the linguistic stuff I'm always interested in. The historical stuff. Yep, I'm all about that shit. I'll soak it up as much as I can. I'm like SpongeBob that way. So.
Hey, either nothing or everything is random. So everything you had to say was fascinating. So, fuck yeah.
Exactly.
I gotta head out. I've got a final tomorrow, so
Oh, get to studying, slacker.
it's philosophy. I already know everything.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
All right, peace out, man. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was actually this one. I'd have to say may not have been as crazy, wacky, fun as usual, but it was definitely mind expanding. Okay, so my brain is now bigger, and I might need to have to buy some new bandanas. So
I was expecting Duke to pop in and, not being able to resist, singing some Soggy Bottom Boys. He let me down.
he's probably working. So yes,
He's screaming at his phone right now. I can hear it.
Santi, that's not exactly true. Not everything is random. Some things are ordered. Anyways, I just ordered food, so no, I'm just kidding. Anyways, IQ, it's you and me, man. We're the last ones in. As usual, he's always on my side. This guy. I hate this backwards shit. Because now I'm pointing at my door, but you're like literally here, but I'm pointing over there just to point to you. Like,
do I have to make like a Jim Morrison reference here?
No, you don't. Well, sure you can. I mean, Morrison was fucking genius lyrically. Anyways, until next time, guys. Like I always say at the end of these things, like the late great Christopher Hitchens once said, "It's
titties
faith because it's not titties because it's not knowledge." We'll see you guys next time.